Hi, HSP friends. It's Lauren with HSP Journey here with Lori Cangilla, PhD and psychologist, excuse me. I'm always getting those
Either
mixed
one's
up. Psychologist. Lori, it's so great to have you back. Thanks for being with us again.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. I'm so happy to be with you and talk about our HSP concerns.
Yes. And today we get to talk about a fun topic, chronic illness. I will admit, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia many years ago, probably 19 or 20 years ago. And so this has been a topic that I've wrestled with, like, is my chronic illness due to being highly sensitive? Like, which one, chicken or the egg? And so, Lori, I leaned on you. I was like, hey, I didn't even know that you also had a chronic illness. I was like, hey, do you want to write on this?
Yeah. So I have rheumatoid arthritis and I've had it for years, probably going back to childhood, but I was diagnosed as an adult. And I think it is such an interesting question because I think every HSP with a chronic illness wants to know, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg. And I think it's more of a case of you have a chicken and you have an egg. And sometimes they make each other worse, and sometimes it makes it more complicated to manage each one, manage your sensitivity when you're ill, and manage your illness when you are more sensitive to maybe feeling things differently, or you have a genetic predisposition to have some risk factors for developing a chronic illness. So it's a
Right.
chicken and egg situation.
Chicken and egg. That is interesting. That's like an omelet with chicken in it, I guess. So I'm curious, like, in your own case, did you have a genetic disposition for rheumatoid arthritis? Did one of your parents have it?
Yeah, actually, my mom has rheumatoid arthritis, and my dad had another kind of autoimmune disorder. So
Hmm.
definitely, there's something in our family history that leaves people more prone to these kinds of conditions. And that's what we see in a lot of chronic illnesses, especially things that involve inflammation. And are autoimmune driven, that there probably is a connection to some of the same genes that are influencing the serotonin and dopamine systems in high sensitivity are probably also being activated for people who have those kinds of autoimmune illnesses that involve a lot of inflammation throughout the body.
Interesting. Yes. And so that's kind of true in my case. Fibromyalgia, often it is a catch-all when they can't. So in my own case, I went through. I had carpal tunnel. It was my first job out of college. It was high-tech public relations. There was a lot of stress. It was good. Like, it was a really good opportunity, and I was definitely engaging. And hey, apologies, you're hearing Luna, who is in her crate because she has some kind of manic puppy squirrel energy this morning. So if you're listening, try to tune that out. So in my own case, I had a workers' comp claim for carpal tunnel and went to all of the different doctors to try to diagnose the nerve damage, and they couldn't. They stick like needles into your carpal tunnel uh, nerve, and they tried to detect nerve damage. So it was awful, like, to go through that testing. I went through it like twice, I think. And they couldn't find any nerve damage, so I couldn't have the carpal tunnel surgery. Really, I came to realize that it was my body telling me that I couldn't sustain that level of work, because it was in my 20s, just out of college. But uh, it correlated to some things that maybe we'll talk about again in another video, another article about work, career options and work. So for me, I had to figure out that I'd have a lot of control over my work situation and a lot of variation, and I couldn't be at a cubicle just typing, churning out press releases all day, every day. Like, so it was like psychological as well as physical, but it definitely was a psychosomatic, like, connection. And I tend to be a somatic feeler, if you will. So things kind of come to me in my body, and I have to stop and go, whoa, and then back up and, like, look at the emotions and what's going on inside. And often that will circumvent some of the physical symptoms. So like, the first heading in the article is chronic illness, not all in your head for HSPs. Like, talk about that. Like, you see patients, probably clients, that are wrestling with those things. They've been diagnosed, right? And then they're like, is this in my head?
or they haven't been diagnosed. I think, so often chronic illnesses are not diagnosed quickly, and people's medical results don't necessarily fit a neat pattern. Like you talked about not having that signaling with your nerve testing, or, people will come in and say, yeah, my blood work says everything's fine, but I still feel exhausted all the time, or I still have
Mm,
pain. And you know, for some people, they might be getting the message from other people in their life or from a medical provider of, oh, you're just depressed, or you're just anxious, or you just need to slow down. You're doing too much in your life. And oftentimes we internalize that to believe, like, oh, well, they're saying it's all in my head. There's nothing going on in my body, except how sensitive people are usually really in tune with what is going on in their body. We tend to be much more able to notice those sensitive stimuli that are happening. So we notice when we are just on the verge of starting to feel hungry, or we notice when we're just starting to come down with a cold.
yeah.
And so it's not all in our head. And it's really easy for people to get discouraged and feel like, oh, this is, like there's something wrong with me mentally, as opposed to there's something going on physically, and either the doctors haven't found it yet, or they don't have the right kind of testing to show what I know to be true in myself. So I do a lot of work with people, just trying to help them separate out, no matter what the doctors say is going on for you, how are you coping with it? How are you living with it? And
Mhm.
what can we do in therapy to help you figure out what's a better way for me to manage my life, so that whether this condition has a name or doesn't, whether I get a formal diagnosis or not, I can at least feel like I have some ability to cope with it effectively.
Wow. Wow, your clients are so lucky to have you. I mean, it's so it's so rare, just as you're talking about how you work with them. I mean, I never had a therapist who worked with me on those things. And so for those people who are listening, whether I mean, I write a lot about working with a therapist, working with a coach. I like to think of my wellness team. That's kind of how I've come to think about what I need. And if you're watching this, maybe you've never thought about that, but a lot of health insurance plans now have, like, I have a wellness coach that I get 6 visits with included in my health plan. And then I have a therapist that's delivered over internet. But whoever you pick as your wellness plan, like if you are a sensitive person, there's a ton of value in pointing your therapist, if they don't know about the trait, like pointing them to some of the resources either on your website or my website, or Googling chronic illness. You're going to find Lori's article, by the way, if you Google chronic illness and HSP. So it'll take you right there. But there's so much value in just the awareness of the specific challenges around that, because you can spend multiple years going down the medical route trying to uncover what the physical symptoms are. And without the HSP piece, I mean, when you add that in, it's like you can shave down a lot of time trying to manage your symptoms and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and I love the idea of a team approach, because I really do think that's what most people need. Probably everybody, not just HSPs, but I think especially as HSPs, we can't just ignore what our bodies are telling us, because our body is just going to continue to give us those messages. So if we're not taking care of our fatigue, if we're not taking care of pain or inflammation, our bodies aren't going to stop giving us those signals. So having that team approach is really important. And then I think knowing for yourself that there are things that can be done. Pain is made up of both the physical signaling that happens in the body, but oftentimes when people live with chronic illness or chronic pain, the body's sending all kinds of signals, and it's up to us to decide what we're doing about those signals. So how are we focusing on them or not focusing on them? What are we doing to do the self-care? So a lot of what I do is just encouraging people to rest enough. Most HSPs need more sleep than the average person. I know for myself, like I would love to be the person who only needs 6 hours of sleep a night, but I really need more like 9. And if I could get 10 every night, I feel so much better in my body. My body just feels good if I'm getting more sleep. It can't always though, and get the rest of my life, life tasks accomplished. but working with people on reducing barriers to getting the kind of sleep that they need, and really, giving up the sense that you can run at the pace that somebody else in your life runs at, who might only need 7 hours of sleep a night. Those are the kinds of things that therapy can support to help highly sensitive people align with how their nervous systems work and what they want for managing their chronic condition.
I love that, Lori, what you shared. And there's one thing in there that I noticed was that she's just going to keep barking, people. I'm so sorry.
She's training to be a therapy dog. She just needs to get it out.
She's on squirrel patrol today. So um, I'll just end with this. Share, help us understand how we can not compare with one another. I'm going to mute myself so you can talk.
So, I mean, there's that expression that comparison is the thief of our joy, and I think that makes so much sense. Part of my approach, and part of why I called it a singularly sensitive approach, is really about helping you figure out as a person, what do you need that's unique to you? And the more time we spend comparing or trying to fit ourselves into a model, the less time we really have to be able to ask ourselves, what kind of work is good for us? What kind of recreation do we need? What kind of relationships do we want? What fills us and adds to us having the best life that we can? And for some people, that also means not comparing yourself within the medical model. So, not saying to yourself, well, other people with my condition took this medication, or they went to this therapy and they got better, and why don't I? And just simply accepting that something didn't work for you, and that means you need to start fresh. And I think because we are highly sensitive and our brains are so active and making those big connections and things, we have that advantage to be able to reflect on what's going on and say, what do I know from what I'm learning about myself, and what might that tell me about what I uniquely need to live with a chronic illness? And let that help to inform the choices we're making, rather than comparing or expecting ourselves to fit in the same mold as somebody else fits into.
Gosh, that's so great. Even even comparing oneself to another highly sensitive person can be difficult. I have a really good friend who, through the last few years of me doing all this highly sensitive person stuff, like she hadn't taken the quiz, and so asked her to take the quiz, and it explained a few things, but I have to be careful, as with any friend. So I'm going to wrap up because my dog is not really cooperating, but I am so grateful. And the article really is informative and wonderful. And I'll put a link below the video here on YouTube. So thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate your time, and have
Thanks
a
so much,
blessed
Laura.
and wonderful day.
Thank you so much. I really